At the end of the day, it's probably easier to impersonate people in email than it is by just wearing a mask. I'm Woody Huffines. I own the Nerds to Go in McKinney and Frisco, Texas, and this is Tech for the Untechnical. It'd be pretty easy if I came to you with the mask on and said that I was somebody that I'm not, because you can see that I've got a Nerds to Go shirt on and you were expecting me, and you might have a little bit of a concern if somebody showed up at your door with that on. But one of the big problems that we've got right now in the email space is email impersonation. One of our clients had somebody that had gotten into their network and they were sending out emails. What they would do is, after an email got sent, in this case it was a title company, so when they would send an email to one of their clients, this guy was doing a man-in-the-middle attack, and he would take that email and change a couple of letters in an email address and then send it on to the customer with a, hey, here's where you send your $6,000 closing check. And it was by email impersonation. Now, one of the things that we've talked about is business email compromise, where someone's email account is compromised and they send an email to you from someone whose account has been hacked. So you can't tell that it's not, the email address is exactly the same because their account has been hacked. So in my case, if you were to look at my Gmail and someone hacked my Gmail and they sent you an email from my email account and they had compromised my email account, it would be my exact email address. And that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is email impersonation. And that's where they craft an email message where the address is close to the one that you're expecting, but not quite. There's a bunch of different ways to do that. They might spell Woody, W-O-O-D-I-E, instead of Woody with a Y, which is the way I spell my name. Or they might put 3 F's in Huffines instead of 2, or 2 S's in Huffines instead of 1. So at first glance, you look up at the email and it looks like it's from Woody Huffines, but it's really not, because of a number of different things. And so how do you protect yourself against email impersonations, where somebody sends you an email where they're impersonating or they're acting like someone else? Well, the first thing is to look for those social engineering clues that we've talked about before. And here's a playlist of a bunch of different topics on email security. But the first thing is to look for those social engineering things that people do, where they create a sense of urgency. You know, I need this in the next 15 minutes, or they create a sense of fear. That's especially true of the stuff running around now with COVID and increasingly the upcoming presidential election, where they create a sense of urgency through either fear, intimidation, or something that's a hot topic that makes you want to respond to that email quickly. It's one of the primary ways that social engineers, or people who are using social engineering, which is essentially being a con man, to get you to do what they want you to do with that email. So the first thing to look for is look for social engineering clues. The second thing to do is kind of check the context. Now remember, I was telling you that if I showed up with a mask like this, you might be able to tell it was still me because of the hideous orange shirt and the logo. But in an email, you also have contextual clues. Like, for example, does the president of the company usually send you an email asking you to buy Amazon gift certificates and get them to him by the end of the day, or give him the numbers by the end of the day? Probably not something that happens a lot because it's out of context. Another way that you might have a context clue is if you get something about Netflix to your business account. If it's your business email, that's probably not the email you use to sign up to Netflix or any number of other streaming services or other things. So if you get an email to your business email that's out of context, it's not in a business context, it's a personal context, that's another clue that this might be an impersonation email that you need to pay attention to. Next, in a business context, look for those near email clues. Like if the name is right, but they usually send it from, for example, my normal address would be from my nerdstogo.com account. So if you got an email purporting to be from me, and instead of whuffines@nerdstogo, it was whuffines@Yahoo, or whuffines@Hotmail, or whuffines@AOL, it's out of context. That's another clue that says, you know, this is not the normal email that I get email from this person from. And that's pretty easy to check. If it's somebody that you correspond with regularly and they get that email up, it doesn't hurt to go look at your email history and see if that's the email address that this person normally sends email to you from. Another clue is change a title. If somebody changes their title, instead of director of operations, it's operations director, or instead of HR director or director of HR. It's the little changes that the person that's impersonating the email may not have examples. They know who they're supposed to be sending it from, but they don't know how they usually have a signature block in those emails. So signature block is another way for you to check contextually, does this email make sense coming from that person? Next thing to pay attention to is the greatest hits of social engineering, like are you at your desk, or did you have a good weekend, or some little personal thing up the front of the email that gives you the sense that the person sending it is inside your company or is someone that you know. It's a little twist of familiarity that's meant to put you off guard, that's meant to make you relaxed with the email, and so you're not checking to see if the email's spelled right and if it's from the right domain and it's from an email address that this person has done before. This is particularly true if in a business context someone's asking for your personal cell phone, or what's your home address, or what are those things that are in your personal life showing up to a business email, or conversely to a personal email from a business. So look for those context clues. Are you getting an email? Does it make sense to get this email from that person to this address? And do those little terms of endearment or little social niceties at the front mean that they're trying to get on your good side to get you to do something that you shouldn't? And finally, and we've talked about this before, about separating the channels of communication. And that is, find another channel to check to see if this email's right. If you get an email from a vendor and the vendor says, hey, our direct deposit account's changed, so this next invoice, we need you to send your money here. Oh, wait a minute. Before you accept that email, don't respond to the email, because the bad guy's going to get if you say, wait a minute, is this Tom? He's going to say, yeah, it's Tom. Call him on the phone. Use a text message to a known cell phone, something to make sure that that email that you got is a valid email and it's not one that's been impersonated. So business email compromise or email compromise is they have the actual account. Impersonation means that they do something to make that account look like the actual account, do a little social engineering to make you comfortable with it, then ask you to do something you don't really want to do. Remember, 90% of the bad stuff that happens in enterprise comes through email. It's either a phishing attack or a malformed attachment or something. So when you get an email, take a little bit of time to make sure that that email is from who you think it's from, and it does what you think it ought to do. And you can separate the channels of communication. You can look at the email address. You can look at the email history to make sure that someone's not impersonating another person that you interact with in business that's trying to get you to do something that you don't want to do. I'm Woody Huffines. I own the Nerds to Go in McKinney and Frisco, Texas. This is Tech for the Untechnical. Hit the subscribe button below, mash like, share, comment. You know the drill. We'll see you again.